Hello everyone, today I want to talk to you about how Beijing has taken control of the largest iron ore mine in Africa. According to American media, China has seized the pricing power of iron ore. In addition, China has suspended its rare earth control measures, but it turns out this doesn't include the EU. The EU, following closely behind the US, kept making moves, but after all that, they ended up reaching an agreement with China. The EU has basically become a joke. During the meeting between the Chinese and US leaders, rare earths became a focal topic. After the meeting, a spokesperson from China's Ministry of Commerce responded to reporters' questions about the initial trade and economic arrangements between China and the US. The White House also released a summary document of the outcomes of the China-US talks 2 days later on November 1st. After assessing the situation, the EU determined that the US announcement about China suspending controls on the export of rare earths and other key materials did not include EU industries. At the press conference held on November 3rd, the European Commission spokesperson Olof Gill said, "Our understanding is that the statement about suspending the further rare earth control measures announced in October for 1 year applies globally. We will continue to communicate with China to understand the specific details, but this is just our understanding." When reporters pressed further, asking whether the export control measures announced by China in April this year were still in effect, Gill responded that they indeed were. It turns out that while China and the US reached an agreement, China and the EU were unable to come to a result. On October 31st, the day the Chinese and US leaders reached an agreement, the day after, a Chinese Ministry of Commerce negotiation delegation met with the EU counterpart delegation led by Denis Redonnet, the EU's chief trade enforcement officer. They held talks on the issue of rare earth export controls, but were unable to reach an agreement. China suspended the relevant export controls. The committee found that, according to Gill, China and the EU have been in ongoing communication, including at the political level. Their goal is very clear. They hope China can provide a stable and reliable supply of rare earth minerals and other critical raw materials to the EU. According to a South China Morning Post article on November 1st, during the summit between the two leaders, China and the EU also reportedly held closed-door talks in Brussels, focusing on the rare earth issue. Although the EU has been actively seeking a diplomatic breakthrough, the China-EU meeting in Brussels does not seem to have alleviated the rare earth crisis faced by European companies. Now, aside from the new progress made in China-US economic and trade negotiations, the Brussels talks seem insignificant, which highlights that China and the US remain the dominant forces shaping the direction of global trade. Europe, caught between the trade rivalry of these two major economies, is becoming increasingly passive and awkward. To sum up briefly, first, the EU is following the US in taking a tougher stance against China, including increasing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. They also criticize China daily for exporting dual-use goods to support Russia's war efforts. In addition, the Netherlands, an EU member state, has even seized the shares of the Chinese semiconductor company Nexperia. In many cases, their actions have gone even further than those of the United States. Second, after China and the US reached an agreement, China relaxed its export controls on rare earths to the US. Of course, this relaxation doesn't automatically apply to the EU. If you want rare earths, you have to come and negotiate with China. EU, what are you willing to offer in exchange for rare earths? Third, the effectiveness of China's rare earth export controls. This includes not allowing rare earths, which are dual-use civilian and military items, to flow to European military-industrial companies. This approach is perfectly justified because EU military companies manufacture weapons that are supplied to Ukraine, which is not conducive to ending the Russia-Ukraine war. China is simply responding in kind, so the EU shouldn't keep criticizing China every day as if they're always in the right. Additionally, let's talk about the iron ore in the Simandou region of Guinea, a West African country. There is a massive iron ore deposit called the Simandou mine, which lies hidden beneath one of the world's most biodiverse forests. As early as the 1950s, when Guinea was still a French colony, this deposit had already been discovered through exploration. Decades later, it was proven to be one of the largest iron ore deposits in the world. However, due to its remote location, frequent military coups, corruption scandals, and power struggles between corporations, the Simandou mine has remained dormant for nearly 30 years. Last month, a brand new railway connecting the mining area officially began operations, transporting ore to a newly built port in Guinea. The plan is to start exporting to China by the end of this year, signaling a major shift in the global iron ore supply, according to a Bloomberg report on November 3rd. With the start of production at the Simandou mine, a large amount of high-quality iron ore will begin to be supplied, greatly enhancing China's control over iron ore pricing and reducing its reliance on major mining giants. This will also transform the weakest link in China's steel supply chain, namely the need to import iron ore, into a strategic advantage. China has never before possessed this level of pricing power over seaborne iron ore. This also continues China's leading position in Africa in terms of resource extraction and refining. The scale of the Simandou mine is astonishing. It is the world's largest undeveloped iron ore deposit, with at least 3 billion tons of reserves. After exhausting the world's highest-grade iron ore from an 8-kilometer mountain strip, Australian mining giant Rio Tinto will only then develop the second mining area. The total investment in this project is as high as $23 billion, making it the largest mining project in African history. It is expected that Guinea could become the second-largest iron ore exporter in Africa. The commissioning of Simandou is not only crucial for Guinea's economy, but will also reshape the global iron ore landscape. For a long time, the global iron ore supply has been controlled by just a handful of companies. Australia's Rio Tinto Group, Australia's BHP Group, and Brazil's Vale are some of the major giants, but according to Bloomberg, after the Simandou mine comes into operation, it will further change the global market landscape, China as the world's largest buyer of iron ore. And Chinese companies are also the main joint venture partners with Rio Tinto in the Simandou mining area. Pan Mu, head of bulk commodity strategy at Liberum, said that China has never had this level of pricing power over seaborne iron ore before. It can be expected that after the Simandou mining area starts production, China will begin to take control in this sector. At the end of the second quarter in September, Bloomberg conducted an on-site visit to Rio Tinto's joint venture in the Simandou mining area. Rio Tinto executive Ai Kichin pointed to a railway bridge and said that this bridge is part of the connection between the production area and the main road network. The bridge is 307 meters long and 28 meters high, and it was completed in just a few months because it replicated the model used for the Beijing-Shanghai high-speed rail bridges. He said that China has already developed skills that the West does not possess, and this is the biggest advantage we see, looking back at the history of Rio Tinto's surveyors and explorers. As early as 1998, they had already set foot in the remote forests of the Simandou mining area. Since then, Rio Tinto has changed CEOs 7 times, and for the West, this was just one part of their investment portfolio. In this little-known mining area, Rio Tinto bought the mining rights but did not develop them. Because the Simandou mining area is located outside the highland dense forests, with no roads connecting it, the difficulty of mining is extremely high. The investment required is staggering, and the risks are enormous. In 2007, the situation changed when Rio Tinto's competitor, BHP Billiton, made a hostile takeover bid of $78 billion to acquire control of Rio Tinto. Facing this pressure, Rio Tinto had a clever idea. They highlighted their mining rights in the Simandou area as their core defense, emphasizing the value of this mining area to prove that BHP Billiton had underestimated Rio Tinto's company value. Ultimately, in 2008, because the outbreak of the global financial crisis unexpectedly helped Rio Tinto get through the tough times, BHP Billiton gave up on acquiring Rio Tinto. However, the Simandou mining area began to attract the attention of the Guinean government, which was eager to know why Rio Tinto was holding on to such an important national resource for so long without developing it. In 2008, former President Lansana Conte stripped Rio Tinto of half its mining rights and transferred them to Israeli diamond tycoon Benny Steinmetz. Steinmetz then turned around and sold this 50% stake in the Guinean mining rights to another mining giant, Brazil's Vale, for $2.5 billion. However, mining rights development stalled again for another 10 years until 2010, when Alpha Condé was elected president of Guinea. The government reformed the industry, and in 2014 reclaimed the 50% mining rights in Simandou held by Steinmetz and Vale. Rio Tinto, which still held the other 50% stake, also faced uncertainty regarding its participation in the development. By mid-2016, Guinea even tried to sell the Simandou mining rights to the Chinese company China National Travel Service Group, but the deal fell through. The turning point came at the end of 2019, when a consortium formed by Chinese and Singaporean companies obtained the development rights and pushed forward the construction of a railway connecting the Simandou mining area. This new company for infrastructure construction was jointly established by Singapore's Winning International Group, China's Shandong Weiqiao Group, and Guinea's United Mining Supply, and is called the Winning Consortium Holdings Company. In mid-2019, it obtained the development rights for Simandou iron ore blocks 1 and 2. At this point, Rio Tinto, as the original project owner, was at risk of becoming a mere bystander. The high capital investment required for Simandou made Rio Tinto hesitant, as it had to prove to investors that after a series of other failed investments, the company could still deliver. Investing in and developing the Simandou mining rights seemed quite risky, but considering the overall situation, the government insisted on retaining Western investors. Coupled with the strong lobbying efforts of the US Embassy, Rio Tinto was ultimately able to continue its involvement. At this time, Jakob Stausholm took over as CEO of Rio Tinto. He inspected the infrastructure that had been built near the mining area and later remarked that he had witnessed China's engineering capabilities and that China could get things done. By July 2022, the winning consortium finally established a joint venture with Rio Tinto, financing and constructing the related infrastructure for developing this massive iron ore mine. According to Bloomberg, after the parties reached cooperation, the final obstacles have been cleared. The first batch of iron ore is expected to start loading onto ships this month, and by the end of the year, about 200,000 tons of ore will be shipped out from the Rio Tinto mining area. Within about 30 months, production is expected to increase to 60 million tons per year, which would account for about 5% of the world's iron ore output in 2024. The Simandou mine is called the Pilbara Killer because the iron content in Simandou's ore is extremely high, reaching as much as 65%. While the average iron content of iron ore from Pilbara in Western Australia has already dropped to 61%. Although a difference of a few percentage points may not seem like much, Simandou's higher grade means less impurities, so this commodity can be sold at a higher price. As Simandou ramps up to full production in the coming years, the price of iron ore may take a hit. Some major mining companies internally predict that the price of iron ore could drop to $85 per ton within 3 years. Even with an optimistic outlook, it's hard to see prices staying above the current $100 to $125 per ton. This is only half of the peak price seen in 2021. The start of production in the Simandou mining region will have a huge impact on Guinea, a country that has experienced political turmoil, coups, and poverty, as well as the Ebola crisis. Most of the workers in the Simandou mining area are illiterate, which shows just how poor this country is. According to estimates by the International Monetary Fund, by the next decade, the mining region will boost Guinea's GDP by more than 25%, changing the fate of the country. Even Rio Tinto's CEO Jakob Stausholm was deeply impressed, saying that very few mining executives get to experience a project like this in their lifetime. What he means is that this is the largest mining project in the world. To sum it up, the long-dormant treasure trove of Simandou in West Africa has finally been awakened. Without China's engineering capabilities behind it, it might have stayed dormant for another 30 years. Secondly, by investing in the Simandou mining area, China has gained control over high-quality, affordable iron ore resources and secured pricing power over iron ore. No longer will it be up to Australian mining giants like BHP to call the shots. This is a major breakthrough that ensures China's resource security.